A judge in Colorado Springs sat up there on his bench and ordered me to take the Medal of Honor off from around my neck, right there in open court, like it was some carnival trinket I'd picked up at a flea market for $1. And 11 months later, that same man had lost the robe, the pension, the lake cabin, and every last scrap of the respect he walked into this life, just assuming he was owed. And I am the one who took every bit of it from him. Real quick, before I get into any of it, I want you to know it means a whole lot to me that you're spending this time here today. It truly does. So do me one small favor while you get settled. Go on down to the comments and tell me what town you're listening from, because I go through and I pull names out of there and I read them out loud right at the top of the next story. So keep an ear out. It just might be you. And if this one gets its hooks in you the way I think it will, do me the kindness of tapping that like and hitting subscribe, because for a little channel like this one, that's about the only thing keeping the whole operation running. Okay. So, my name is Ray Bishop. I'm 71 years old, and I've lived in Colorado Springs damn near my entire life. West Side, up near Old Colorado City, close enough that I can see Pikes Peak out my kitchen window every single morning that God gives me. That mountain and me go way back. So does the house I'm about to tell you about, because that house is where this whole thing starts, and it's where it ends too. My father was Walter Bishop. Navy man, served in the Pacific in the Second Big War, came home, married my mother, and bought a little brick house on the west side with money he saved $1 at a time. He raised 2 boys in it, me and my younger brother Neil. Dad worked 41 years at the rail yard and then took odd jobs after that, just to keep his hands busy. He was a hard man, quiet, never once in his life handed out a compliment he didn't think you'd bled for. But he was fair. Fair mattered to that man more than money, more than pride, more than his own comfort. Hang on to that word. Fair, because it comes back around later and it cuts deep. Now I'll tell you the part I don't much like telling, and I'll keep it short, because I've spent about 50 years trying not to look straight at it. When I was 19, I went to Vietnam. I came home with a medal I have never once in my life felt like I earned, because the men who earned it right alongside me didn't come home at all. I'm not going to walk you through that day. All you need to know is that the country calls it the Medal of Honor, that there are only a small handful of us still drawing breath who get to wear it, and that I have never, not one single time, worn it to make myself look like something. I've put it on exactly twice. Once when the president himself set it around my neck, and once at my mother's funeral because my father asked me to, quiet, with his hat in his hands. That was it. 2 times in 50 years. Keep that number too. 2. So there's your setup. Now let me take you to where the ground opened up. About 3 years back, my dad had a stroke. A bad one. He came out of it. But he came out smaller, slower, needing help with just about everything. And here's the thing you need to understand about my family. My brother Neil lived 20 minutes away out in Briargate, in a big new build he was always a little behind on. And Neil did not come. Neil ran a construction and real estate outfit, always had a deal cooking, always had somewhere more important to be. So it was me. I moved back into my father's house, into my old bedroom, 70-year-old man sleeping under the same ceiling I slept under as a kid, and I took care of that man for 2 years. 2 years. I want you to sit with that. I bathed him. I drove him to Penrose for his appointments. I learned to cook the 3 things he'd still eat. I sat up with him the nights he got scared, and didn't know what year it was. And Neil, my brother Neil, he'd swing by maybe once a month, stay 45 minutes, check his watch, and leave. But every single time before he walked out that door, he'd find some little way to ask about the house. What's the house worth these days, Ray? You get that roof looked at, Ray, a place like this in this market. real casual, like he was just making conversation. He wasn't making conversation. Here's the thing about my father, though. His body went, but his mind came back. It really did. By that second year, he was sharp as a tack again, doing the crossword, arguing with the TV, telling me the same 3 stories about the rail yard I'd heard 1,000 times. And one afternoon, he had me drive him downtown to a lawyer, an old fella named Tom Prewitt, who'd done Dad's business for 30 years. And Dad sat in that office with his back straight, and he made out his will. I wasn't in the room for the important part. He made me wait in the hall, said it wasn't my business, and that was Dad all over. But Tom Prewitt walked me out afterward, and he shook my hand, and he said, "Your father knows exactly what he wants, Ray, and he's a lucky man to have a son like you." I didn't think a thing of it at the time. I just wanted to get Dad home before his program came on. My father passed 11 months ago in his own bed, in that house, with me holding his hand. I was there. Neil was not. Neil got there 2 hours after, and the first thing my brother did, the very first thing, standing in the front room while our father was still warm down the hall, was ask me if I knew where Dad kept his papers. I should have known right then. I did know, somewhere in me. I just didn't want to. So we buried Dad, or I thought we were going to. And about 3 weeks after the funeral, I'm sitting on the porch one evening, and a young man comes up the walk in a golf shirt and hands me an envelope and says, "Mr. Bishop, you've been served," and he's back in his car before I even understand what I'm holding. My brother was suing me. My own brother. And you want to know what for? Here's where it gets good. And by good, I mean the kind of thing that makes your stomach drop straight through the floor. Neil had a will. A different will. A will dated 6 weeks before Dad died. That left the house, the land up toward Woodland Park, the savings, all of it, to Neil. Every dime. And it left me one thing. $1. There was a line in there, and Ellen read it to me later, that left Raymond Bishop the sum of $1 in recognition of services rendered. Services rendered, like I was a plumber who'd overcharged him. And it got worse than that, because tucked into the lawsuit was Neil's story about how this all came to be, and the story was that I, Ray, the war hero, had spent 2 years isolating a sick old man, poisoning him against his other son, and strong-arming him into signing away his estate to me. That the earlier will, the real one, Tom Prewitt's will, was a product of my coercion. Neil's filing called me, and I'll never forget this phrase, a manipulator who hid behind his uniform. Hid behind my uniform. I read that line standing in my father's kitchen, and my hand started shaking, and I had to sit down on the floor, right there on the linoleum, because my legs quit on me. Because here's the thing. I had never even seen a second will. There was no second will. Tom Prewitt's will, the real one, split things fair, the way Dad wanted. The house to me because I'd cared for him. The land and the savings divided even between me and my brother. Fair. Dad's word. And Neil had gone and manufactured a whole other document to steal the whole thing and paint me as the villain doing the stealing. That's when I stopped being sad, and I got quiet. And when I get quiet, that's the part you want to keep listening for. Now I made a mistake at first, I'll own it. I hired the wrong lawyer. A nice enough guy off a billboard, cheap, in over his head. And at the first hearing, he got absolutely run over. Because it turned out the judge assigned to our case was a man named Malcolm Grady. And Judge Grady, from the second he looked down at me, did not like what he saw. I couldn't figure it at first. I hadn't said a word to the man. But everything went Neil's way. Every motion, every objection, every little ruling, all of it slid toward my brother, like the floor was tilted. My billboard lawyer asked for time to bring in a document examiner, and Grady denied it, said we were wasting the court's time on a straightforward matter. Straightforward? my father's whole life, straightforward. I walked out of that first hearing, and I sat in my truck in the parking structure, and I did something I hadn't done since I was a young man. I put my head on the steering wheel, and I cried. Because I thought, this is it. This is how it goes. The man with money and a slick lawyer and a friendly judge just takes it, and there's not one thing an old man can do about it. But I want to tell you about the day it turned, and it turned on the exact day it looked the most lost. There was a big hearing coming, the one where Grady was going to rule on whether the case even went forward on Neil's fake will or my dad's real one. And I made a decision. I decided I was going to go into that courtroom and honor my father. My dad was a Navy veteran. This was about his estate and his final wishes, and I was going to stand up for him the way he'd have stood up for me. So I got out my good jacket, the dark one, and I did the thing I'd done twice in 50 years. I put the medal on, around my neck, the way you wear it, the pale blue and the white stars. For my father. Not for that room. For Walter Bishop. I walked in and I sat down at the table, and Judge Grady looked at me over his glasses, and his lip did this little curl, and he said, "Mr. Bishop, you'll remove that." I thought I misheard him. I said, "Your Honor?" He said, "That decoration around your neck, take it off. This is a court of law, not a parade. I won't have you performing for this gallery." And the whole room went dead silent. And Neil's lawyer, a slick operator named Curtis Lang, he leans back in his chair with this smirk, and he goes, "And if I may, Your Honor, for the record, we have no verification that the item is even what Mr. Bishop claims it to be. No verification that it's what I claim it to be." There it was. In front of my father's neighbors, in front of the whole room, this lawyer stood up and told everybody that maybe old Ray Bishop was a fraud, that maybe I'd bought that medal in a pawn shop, stolen valor, the lowest thing you can accuse a man like me of, and he said it with a smile. And Judge Grady didn't shut him down. He nodded. He said, "Exactly the point. Remove it, Mr. Bishop, or I'll hold you in contempt." So I stood up, in front of everybody, and with my hands shaking so bad I could barely work the clasp, I took the Medal of Honor off from around my neck, the medal they gave me for the worst day of my life, for carrying 2 men out under fire, and I folded it up in my handkerchief and I put it in my pocket, and I sat back down, and I was 71 years old, and I felt like I was 19 again, and completely alone. That was the bottom. I want you to sit in that bottom with me for a second, because that's where I was. Beat. Broke. Humiliated in my own hometown. Written up in a legal filing as a manipulator hiding behind a uniform, and now made to strip that same honor off my neck by a man in a robe who wouldn't look me in the eye. Now, here's where the story turns, and it turns because of a young woman named Ellen Reyes. Ellen was the daughter of a man I served with. Her father and me went back to the jungle together, and after everything Ellen had gone and become a lawyer, Army JAG for a dozen years, and then she came home to Colorado and did probate and estate work with a little clinic that helps veterans. She heard what happened in that courtroom. I don't even know how. Word travels. And she showed up at my house that same night with a legal pad and a look on her face I hadn't seen since her daddy. And she sat at my kitchen table and she said, "Ray, I'm going to ask you some questions, and then I'm going to take this whole thing apart. And you are going to put that medal back on, and no man is ever going to make you take it off again." And then Ellen went to work, and Lord, did she work. First thing, that fake will was dated 6 weeks before Dad died. Ellen pulled the date, wrote it on her pad, and then she pulled my dad's medical records from Penrose. And here's the thing. Here's the beautiful thing. On the exact day that will was supposedly signed, my father was in a hospital bed at Penrose, recovering from a second small stroke, and his chart said, in a nurse's own handwriting. Patient unable to sign consent forms. Right hand weakness. Family to assist. My father physically could not have signed his own name that day. Could not have. His hand didn't work, and yet there his signature sat, big and bold and steady, on Neil's miracle will. Ellen looked at that and she smiled, and it was not a warm smile. She said, "They got greedy with the date, Ray. They picked a day out of the air, and they picked the wrong one." Second thing, that will was notarized. There was a notary stamp on it, and a signature, a woman named Sherry Dunn. So Ellen tracked down the notary. Now in Colorado, a notary keeps a journal, every notarization logged, and Ellen was entitled to look at that journal. And when she finally got Sherry Dunn's journal, the entry for my father's will was, and I quote Ellen here, a mess. The address was wrong. The identification listed was a driver's license number that didn't match my father's. And most of all, my father, a man who could not stand up without help, who was in a hospital across town, had supposedly appeared in person in front of this notary. It was a lie top to bottom, and it was a lie written down in ink in her own book. Third thing, and this is the one that turned it from a fight into a war. Ellen kept asking me, "Why is this judge so hot against you, Ray? You never met the man. There's something under it." And so Ellen, being Ellen, started pulling public records, county deeds. And you want to know what she found? 2 years before, Judge Malcolm Grady had bought himself a cabin up above Woodland Park, a nice piece with a view, worth easily $400,000. And he'd bought it for $110,000. From a company. And that company, when you peeled back the paperwork, when you followed it all the way down, was owned by my brother, by Neil. Neil had handed a sitting district judge a $300,000 gift dressed up as a real estate sale. 2 years before, that same judge got handed a case with Neil's name on one side and mine on the other, and that judge never said one word about it, never recused himself, never disclosed a thing, just sat up there and told a war veteran to take off his medal. When Ellen laid those deed papers on my kitchen table and explained what they meant, I got up and I walked out onto my porch and I looked at that mountain for a long time. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt sick, because my own brother had bought a judge to steal from me and to call me a liar and a fraud in front of my neighbors, and he'd done it with a smile. But I didn't stay sick long, because Ellen said, "Now we go get them. All of them." So here's the thing about how you fight a rigged room. You don't fight it inside the room. You go over it. Ellen filed a motion for Judge Grady to recuse himself and laid out that cabin deal in black and white. And you know what Grady did? He denied it. Right there in his own courtroom, the judge got to rule on whether the judge had a conflict, and he ruled that he did not. Said the sale was an arm's-length transaction. Said Ellen was making baseless accusations to muddy a simple case. Denied. And for about a day, we were right back at the bottom, because the good old boy network was closing ranks, and I thought, they're just going to protect their own. That was the third time I thought I'd lost. And here's what I've learned about that feeling. Sometimes it shows up right before the whole thing breaks open. Because Ellen didn't stop at the motion. She took that cabin deal, and the medical records, and that garbage notary journal, and she filed a formal complaint with the Colorado Commission on Judicial Discipline. And at the same time, quiet, she went and had a real conversation with Sherry Dunn, the notary. And Sherry Dunn, when she understood that she was about to eat a felony forgery charge all by her lonesome, for a will she got paid $500 to fake, Sherry Dunn did the smart thing. She flipped. I was there in Ellen's little office when Sherry's statement came back. Ellen read it out loud. Sherry Dunn swore, under oath, that Neil Bishop had brought her a will already signed, that my father was never present, that Neil told her the old man was too sick to come in and to just stamp it, and that Neil paid her cash. And there it was, the whole rotten thing, confessed. Now watch how fast it all comes down, because this is the part I promised you. Once that notary flipped, the case wasn't a probate fight anymore. It was a fraud case. Ellen took the whole package, the notary's confession, the hospital records, the deed showing Grady's cabin, and she walked it into the district attorney's office. And the DA, who did not have a cabin from my brother, looked at all of it and opened a criminal investigation into my brother for forgery and attempted theft, which in Colorado, for an estate that size, is a serious felony, the kind that comes with real time, and into the notary. And once the DA was involved, the whole thing was out of Grady's little kingdom for good. They pulled Grady off my case, assigned a new judge, a woman named Judge Alvarez, and I want to tell you about the day I walked back into court in front of her, because it was the exact opposite of the first time, and it healed something in me. I wore the medal. Ellen told me to, and I did. And I sat down, and I braced for it, and it never came. Because Judge Alvarez looked at the 2 wills, and the hospital record showing my father couldn't sign, and the notary's confession, and she did not waste anybody's time. She threw Neil's will in the garbage where it belonged. She upheld my father's real will, Tom Prewitt's will, the fair one, the house to me. The land and the savings split even, because that's what my dad wanted. Fair, right to the end, even split with the brother who tried to rob him. And then she did one more thing. She looked over at my brother, and she looked at his lawyer, Curtis Lang, and she said, "For the record, this court finds the conduct in this matter deeply troubling, and I am referring it in full to the appropriate authorities." And Curtis Lang, Mr. Smirk, Mr. No Verification, went white as a sheet, because he knew what that meant for him. Let me give you the reckonings one by one, because every single one of them got what was coming, and I watched most of it happen. Sherry Dunn, the notary. Her commission was revoked by the Secretary of State. She pleaded guilty to a forgery charge to stay out of prison and got probation and a record, and she'll never notarize so much as a birthday card again. That's the small fish, and even the small fish didn't get away clean. Curtis Lang, the lawyer who stood up in open court and told a room full of people that my medal might be fake. The referral Judge Alvarez made went to the state bar. Now I'm told these things take time. But last I heard, Curtis Lang was suspended and fighting to keep his license at all. And every client he had went looking for a lawyer who hadn't tried to help a man forge a dead veteran's will. I saw him one time after all this, at a gas station on Fillmore, and he saw me, and he couldn't get his card out of the pump fast enough. Didn't smirk that time. My brother Neil, the man who came to our father's house to ask about the roof. The DA charged him forgery and theft. And Neil, who always had a deal cooking, who was always a little behind, did not have the money to fight a felony and lose his business at the same time. He took a plea. He's got a felony on his record now. He paid restitution, he did community service, and he did some weekends in the county jail. And every real estate license and business loan he'll ever apply for is going to have that word on it. Forgery, and the estate he tried to steal whole. He got exactly the fair half our father left him, and not $1 more. Fair. Dad won in the end. Fair won. I have not spoken to my brother since. He sent me a letter about 6 months ago. 2 pages. All about how it got out of hand. How he never meant it to go that far. How we're family. I read it once. I did not write back. Some things a letter can't fix, and my father raised me to know the difference. And now, the judge. Malcolm Grady. The man who ordered me to take my medal off. The one the whole title of this thing is about. You want to know what happened to him, and I've been saving it. That complaint Ellen filed with the Commission on Judicial Discipline, it did not get buried after all, because once the DA opened a criminal file on the cabin deal, the Commission couldn't look the other way. They investigated Grady, and what they found was exactly what Ellen laid on my kitchen table. A sitting judge took a $300,000 sweetheart deal from a man, told no one, and then presided over that man's lawsuit and ruled for him at every turn while ordering the other side to strip an honor off his neck. There is not a robe in this country thick enough to survive that. I went to the hearing. I sat in the gallery, in the back, in my good jacket. And yes, I wore the medal, and nobody in that room told me to take it off, and I watched them lay it all out, deed by deed, ruling by ruling. And Malcolm Grady sat there, and for the first time since I'd known his face, he wasn't looking down at anybody. He was the one being looked down at. Before they could even finish removing him, he resigned, which is what they do when the writing's on the wall. Tried to keep a shred of the pension, and even that got tangled up in the criminal side because the cabin deal, the disguised bribe, that opened its own investigation into him, separate from all of it. Last I heard, Malcolm Grady was spending what he had left on his own defense lawyers. He lost the bench, he lost the robe, he lost the pension he thought was a sure thing. He lost his name in this town, where a judge's name is about all he's got. And he lost it in the exact same building where he made an old man take off a medal in front of his neighbors. The robe he thought he was born to wear, gone, and the man he was so sure was a fraud. That man was sitting in the back of the room with the real thing around his neck, watching it happen. I didn't gloat. I want you to know that. I didn't say a word to him, didn't need to. I just sat there, and I let it be true. Let me tell you how it ends for me, because there's one more thing. My father, Walter Bishop, Navy man, Pacific, never got the send-off I wanted for him, because the day we should have been laying him to rest was the day I got served, and everything after that was the fight. So once it was all done, once the real will was upheld, and the house was mine, and my father's wishes were the law, I did the last thing I owed that man. I took him out to Pikes Peak National Cemetery, out on the east side of town, where the veterans rest with that mountain watching over them, and I stood there in the wind, while they folded the flag into that hard triangle and put it in my hands. And this time, I had the medal on. And this time, no living soul could tell me to take it off, because I'd made sure of that. And when it was done, I drove back to that little brick house on the west side, my father's house, my house now, and I sat on the porch, and I looked at Pikes Peak the way I've looked at it every morning of my life. And I want to tell you, my chest actually loosened, like something that had been clamped down on it for 11 months, finally let go. The house was quiet. My father was at rest. My brother's lie was buried instead of him. And that mountain was still standing right where it's always been, not caring one bit about any of it. And somehow, that was the most comforting thing in the world. I sat out there a long while, just breathing. So here's the only thing I know worth passing on to you, and I'm not going to dress it up because I'm too old to make it sound pretty. There are going to be people in your life who can't stand the light you carry, and instead of finding their own, they'll try to convince the whole world that yours was never real. They'll call you a fraud. They'll make you take it off in front of everybody. And for a minute you'll believe them, because it's an awful lonely thing to be doubted about the truest part of who you are. But a man in a robe can order you to unclasp a medal from around your neck. He cannot reach the thing it stands for. That they don't get to take. That was never around your neck to begin with. It was always further in than their hands could go. My dad knew that. He knew it about honor, and he knew it about fair. Took me 71 years in a courtroom to really learn it. But I learned it, And now you've got it too, from an old man on a porch, so you don't have to learn it the hard way like I did. You take care of yourself out there. And don't you ever let anybody make you take it off.